Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Aparuta de sangamata satavara yesorvanta bamunjantu satang. Yes, but it will do. We've tried to find all other kinds of other words. Unsatisfactoriness is another one. The sense of something, very nature of conditions is that their nature is basically unsatisfying, and that's a good reflection also. But anyway, the Pali word dukkha, I think, is being adopted in the English language, like Buddha and Dhamma and Sangha. And English is a language that takes all the other languages into it. So it's quite a malleable, flexible language. In terms of it, really, it's a conglomeration, isn't it, of all different languages of kind of Anglo-Saxon, German, French, Latin, and Malay, Hindi, and all other kinds of words added into it. It's easily if you look at the way it's used in different parts of the world, here in the United States or in the UK or India, and that is a language that lends itself to almost every possibility. But in one of the valuable things of having a kind of classical language like Pali or Sanskrit is that they're not changeable languages. They're what they call dead languages. So they kind of they remain static, and that way they're good for reference. Where English the words can change from one generation to the next. The interpretations or the meanings can vary and change, but in Pali, of course, they don't. So we use learning Pali and using that as a kind of helpful tool. I feel that it is very, very useful because it is no longer a spoken language. But this translation, of dukkha as that which can't be borne or which we can't bear or endure. And so this reflecting on this, because contemplating the world, the sensory world that we live in, this realm of consciousness and Vedana and feeling, where we live a lifetime within the restrictions and limits of a physical body, where we have to deal with this incarceration and this incarnation in this form here for a lifetime, which is a sensitive form. It's living within something that is continually being impinged upon in some way or another. With the temperature of the room, whether it's too hot or too cold, the wind, the rain, the dryness, the dampness, just on the level of weather, temperature. But in terms of sight or smell, taste, touch, and also the fact that so much of our suffering is created through the mind, isn't it? The fear, the desire, the greed, hatred, and delusion that we can create into consciousness. The fact that we can remember the past, and that we can hold on to painful memories going way back into early childhood. You find, and as you get older, at my age, you can remember so many of the things, the extreme experiences going back into early childhood, the pleasure, the happiness, or the painful one. So when we remember something painful, we feel that way. And if we grasp this out of ignorance and not understanding it in terms of Dhamma, then we find that we still suffer over something that happened 60 years ago. The painful experiences in adolescence or so forth, the broken hearts, the lost loves, the unrequited love experiences, the unfairness of a society, the fact that we get blamed for things we haven't done, or we're not appreciated, understood very well by others, and on like this. We can easily hold on to these memories until we die. So you meet elderly people. You go to an old people's home. You see, I remember in England going to one where this old woman sitting there in the lounge, TV lounge, and the only word she could ever say is shit. I imagine this is going with the last thought before she dies. Rather frightening, isn't it? Yeah. Or another one would say, "You're not going to get my money." Pathetic to see an old person, isn't it, with just this obsession and this thought that tends to obsess the consciousness. Or we can use our minds to remember the happy times, the golden days, the successes, and then we feel happy. It makes us feel happy. Or we might even feel somehow unhappy because we refer to happiness as something of the past, and maybe the present isn't particularly golden for us. So just by this ignorance, is avijja, not understanding things as they really are, then even with the most cultivated tastes and refining our conscious experience, it's still, if we have no understanding or insight into Dhamma, then this tends to be a source of suffering or of dukkha. In other words, we feel that we can't bear it. It's too much to bear. I can't take any more of this. These kind of thoughts, I've had enough. I can't stand this anymore. This is unbearable. And then this thought can determine the amount of suffering that we create in the present. And I remember when I first went to stay with Ajahn Chah in Thailand, I had a lot of these thoughts because in a situation where the food was pretty awful actually, and just the sense of feeling I couldn't stand it anymore. I can't take any more of this. And then I realized that I could. And actually I could take a lot more of it. Well, that was quite an insight to see that how this voice, inner voice that says, I've had enough, I can't take any more of this, is something that I'm creating. And if I believe it, then I tend to stop there and perpetuate that whole that limitation. But just reflecting the fact that I can take that even though that inner voice is saying, I've had enough, I can't take any more. then the realization, but I can. I'm just, it says I can't take any more, and I'm taking more. And there it is. And so then you feel, you don't trust that. The kind of dukkha that one creates out of ignorance, you begin to see through it. Now, there's a natural dukkha of being born in a human body. In fact, that it is a painful, generally quite painful experience from birth to death. Most births are quite traumatic. I mean, just being born and being forced out of the womb and so forth. So it is, in itself quite an experience of pain and being thrown out or forced out of maybe a very comfortable environment, the womb, into the cold, cruel world, into a surgery with people all in green masks and thinking, pulling you out this way and that, and white tiles and sterile, everything's sterile. Maybe your mother, unconscious. Maybe she couldn't take any more of it. And then growing up, isn't it? And then aging, old age, sickness, death. And so the Buddha emphasized this, the suffering of the natural suffering that we all share in the fact of birth, the aging process, sickness, disease, and death. These are normal kind of. This is the way it is in terms of this world. We're born. Birth implies death, isn't it? All that is born will die. And then if one's life lasts for very long, then the aging process. And then the sickness, disease, is just a natural experience that all human beings can recognize as a part of this realm. Being sensitive also, and what we see, isn't it? We have to see not only the beautiful, but the ugly, the repulsive. So that which contacts us, which comes into our field of vision, we don't have that much control over. I only want to look at, I command that the universe present me only with beautiful objects to look at. It's impossible, isn't it? It's not the way it is. So the sight is like this. You feel, when you see something beautiful, pleasurable, and so forth, and you feel, it has that kind of feeling. When it's ugly and repulsive, then you feel that way. So this is just the way things are. We're affected by the senses and the contact that we have, the impingement that the sense objects have on these forms, this body and these senses. So we're recognizing the way it is. The 5 khandhas, the 6 ayatanas, the 4 elements, the earth, fire, water, and air element, consciousness itself, the world that we live in, isn't it? The planet that we're experiencing is both beautiful and ugly, pleasurable and painful. So when we talk about suffering and freedom from suffering, it doesn't mean that we become insensitive. Now, some people think that enlightenment must be something that makes you totally and completely insensitive. It's like being kind of a suit of armor. So when you see something pathetic or sad or nasty or ugly, you just don't feel anything at all. Completely, we say equanimity, total indifference. Or is that what we mean by equanimity? Or does enlightenment allow you to be sensitive without being frightened of it or being deluded by sensitivity? So I remember in my first attempts at meditation was really wanting to get into states where I would not be sensitive anymore. Trying to get levels of concentration which were refined, where I could refine conscious experience and completely shut out the coarseness, the nastiness, the chaos, the irritations of the sense world that I would ordinarily experience if I wasn't in this trance or this level of concentration. So at first this was a very attractive desire to get to this level of concentration where I could completely shut out all that was painful and irritating and unpleasant from my consciousness. Or, say, the desire to be a hermit, to get away from the irritations, frustrations, fears, anxieties, and worries that community life or society would bring me. If I go live alone, often it's ideal of this kind of Zen monk living in the mountains, listening to the sound of the water falling and writing haiku poems, and not having to live with a lot of irritating other monks. I don't mean Ajahn Amber, okay? So, in some ways I can see motivated, what propelled me into monastic life was a desire to get out of this sensitive state, because I couldn't bear it. It was too much to bear. And so the movement toward the cave, or the hermit, the little kuti in the forest, or the sense of being alone, in which the problems that come up in relationships and in community, family life or society would no longer present themselves. And to develop states of samadhi in which I could live in a more refined consciousness, and even the coarseness of the forest and the conditions around me could be kind of pushed aside for, hopefully, you get into states that could last long periods of time. Your yogis could go for a week in the kind of totally a kind of trance-like state where they didn't feel anything. And I thought, that'd be quite nice. A week at a time. Or you can, talking to people who've been into drugs and so forth, the addictive drugs, where you can, take something or inject something into your body, and you go into, you lose the anxiety or the self-consciousness or that thing, that irritating nastiness. I can't take any more. I've had enough. This is more than I can bear. Goes away, and for a while you can sustain a sense of well-being and pleasure. So one can understand why people are attracted to drugs, alcohol, or addictive substances, where you can get some measure of feeling of well-being or losing that sense of self-consciousness. The sense of yourself as a personality, I found, is something I couldn't bear. What do people think of me? Whenever you're with people, you think, what did they think? Did I say something wrong? Do people like me? Or the fear of being rejected or criticized or put down or judged in some way. And of course you find yourself doing this towards others. As much as you fear it from others, your fear is generated from your own critical mind, which dwells on what you don't like and what you don't want, what you don't agree with. So this self, the sakya ditti, this sense of oneself as a personality, is more than one can bear. At least this was my experience. My personality was more than I could stand. So this is the suffering that when we talk about the First Noble Truths. Now that we are beginning to recognize is created out of ignorance. Sensitivity is the way it is. The body is like this. Consciousness is like this. The sight, sound, smell, taste, touch, retentive memory, language, and all these thinking, logic and reason, or emotional habits or whatever. We're looking at them now in terms of Dhamma rather than in terms of self. So that's why emphasizing this sense of refuge, where the paradigm is one of Buddha knowing the truth, or the Dhamma, knowing the laws of nature, or the truth of the way it is, a state of pure intelligence, like the Buddha, you can see, is pure wisdom, pure intelligence. It's not personal. It's not male or female, or Indian, or European, or anything like that. It's when we talk about Buddha, we're transcending these kind of perceptions of that we create in our cultural conditioning into this a natural state of pure intelligence. Where if we don't recognize this potential that we all have, then everything is interpreted as me, this person experiencing life, which much of it I can't bear, I can't endure, it's too much for me. So I don't see it in terms of Dhamma, I see everything as a kind of threat. I see life and the sensory impingement, or the possibilities of aggression and attack and humiliation and rejection as this potential of destroying me or making me miserable and unhappy on a personal level. So then life is experienced through fear and desire. So we desire to have, to be in control and to make sure that I'm okay, I've got everything covered. The door's locked, the windows are locked, burglar alarm is on, the Rottweiler is, I didn't feed it today, so if anybody, I've got the telephone and can call the police if necessary, and email and faxes and internet and so forth, all there to make sure, kind of protect me in some way. Well, we can live like fear is a kind of instinctual emotional state, isn't it? It's very much on the basic fear is very animal. You notice wild animals in in Amravati, there are a lot of squirrels. I used to watch them when they jump out of the trees and they're on the ground. They're really very frightened. You can just sense this fear of being in a very unsafe place. They feel quite confident when they're up in the tree. They kind of chase each other and do all kinds of fantastic feats up in the tree. But when they're on the ground, they sense, a cat, a dog, danger, threatened. So, because squirrels know that there's no moral agreement with cats or dogs, is there? There's nothing about Banadibata in terms of the animal kingdom. So it's survival of the fittest. How clever you are. The intelligence of the wild animal is the intelligence of survival. How to survive and get through life without being killed or eaten by another animal. But the human realm we share that kind of fear with the animal realm. So we don't, it's not that, we can certainly understand it, can't we? We can certainly understand the fear of being killed or abused or attacked from outside. That's certainly a possibility for all of us. But in terms of say we can't, like on this retreat, the precept Bhanadibata is an agreement not to intentionally violate each other in any way, to harm or kill any of us here, or even taking it to a more refined level of respect for life in general. So these turkey vultures and that, you might want to kill them sometimes, but you don't. Or say if ants invade your room, isn't it? That's a good one when you're in Thailand. These termite migrations. Several times I've gone back to my little hut in the jungle, and it's been completely taken over by termites. It's interesting to watch the state of mind. You feel, they've taken over my hut, and they're going to eat the whole thing. I lived in a bamboo hut with a glass roof. I thought termites, they eat everything. So I thought by morning the whole thing would be pulp. But actually, they were on a migration. They were just passing through, and my kuti happened to be in the path, and they just moved through it. And by dawn, they were all gone. But the mental state was wanting to kill them. If I could get some kind of spray and just, get them out, because this sense of being invaded by alien creatures taking over my space, and the emotion of wanting to get rid of them as quickly and expediently as possible. I can't bear it, in the sense of I can't stand these termites in my kuti, but I could stand it. But the feeling, the emotion was, I can't stand this. So just noting that, when one of the epithets of the Buddha is the lokavidu, or knower of the world. So what I'm doing now is trying to point out the world is like this. Just trying to get to encourage you to contemplate, what being a human being is on planet Earth at this time. It's like this. Whether it's what you idealize or how you think it should be is not the point. It's not trying to criticize the way it is, but just notice that being conscious, being sensitive is like this. That we can only sit for so long, and we feel restless or feel pain, or we have to go to the toilet, or we get hungry or thirsty, or we get too hot or too cold, or we get irritated by if there's noise, or somebody slams the door, or whatever. There's also this impingement on us that is just the way the world is. And so we begin to contemplate the nature of the world that we're living in, what it is to have a human body, that it does get old. We have to endure pain and sickness, disease, and then it's death, which none of us have experienced yet. That's in the future. For us, death is what we will experience. So that every human being will, has those who have died have already experienced, those who haven't will experience death. So this is the Buddha was pointing to the way it is, and so we see this in terms of Dhamma rather than in terms of ideals. Like when I was saying as a child, thinking God shouldn't have created pain, and He should have created everything more fairly, so that there wouldn't be, people born deformed and people, with all kinds of problems and difficulties, mentally unstable or deficient, or arms, legs missing, or blind, or whatever. There shouldn't be like that. The ideal God would not create anything that was less than ideal. But that's what we can create with our minds, ideals about how things should be. And if life doesn't live up to this ideal, then we feel, I can't take this. This is more than I can stand. I can't bear this unfairness. The fact that everything is not perfect I can't take it. It's too much. It shouldn't be this way. And then we feel averse. We get righteously indignant. We get angry. We want to blame somebody. We blame God or blame something or other. But we don't. But most people who are caught in that way of thinking have not contemplated the nature of the world. They're not aloka we do. They haven't seen what the world really is. So in Buddhism, when we talk about the world, we're not talking about the world in the way that we tend to conceive the world. It's the world that we create. We're seeing now the Dhamma of the Rupa, Vedana, Sanya, Sankhara, Vijnana, of the body, of the mental states. We're seeing it in terms of Dhamma, not in terms of an ideal world or as the world. The world, when we talk about the world, we're talking about how we create the world. We're the creators of the world. So the world that I live in as a personality, it's going to be different than a lot of it we might share certain perceptions and attitudes that we have, but a lot of it is going to be, my world, me and mine, myself, my fears and my desires that I create, and this is a world that I'm the creator of this world. And the Buddha is the knower of the world. So taking refuge in Buddha means that you're beginning to look at the world as a world rather than in terms of yourself or myself. When you contemplate also that each one of us creates our own world, so that's why there is so much misunderstanding and lack of, we don't understand. We think you have the same world that I have, but actually much of it isn't the same at all. And surprise, and you live in monastic community sometimes, I remember being quite shocked sometimes by the fact that people had such strange worlds they lived in. Weren't like mine at all. And I didn't think my world was pretty all that good, but some of the monks and nuns, the worlds they live in are a lot of fear and a lot of anger, resentment, and obsessions and so forth that even though on one level they can look quite happy and normal, but the worlds that they create oftentimes filled with anguish and despair or fear and desire. So it wasn't that I was glad that they had this, but I was glad to realize that I wasn't the only one that lived in a strange world. Because and the mistakes generally made around in living in community, thinking that you think like I do, or your reactions to situations are going to be like me, and when you don't, then there's something wrong with you. When you react in a different way, then I think, what's wrong with her? She should, if she was like me, she wouldn't have reacted like that. So this is a reflection on getting to know the world as the world, and the body is like this, rather than seeing it in terms of the body is mine. So, like getting old, isn't it? Old age is like this. If you see the aging process in terms of Dhamma, then it's interesting to get old. if you see it in terms of self, you think, what's so interesting about it? You know, used to be quite vigorous, now don't have much get up and go. You know, got up and left, you know. Or, you know, you wrinkled appearance and so forth, you're no longer, you know, very attractive looking. An old man. Will you still need me? Will you still feed me when I... But in terms of Dhamma, it's you know, I find it interesting. I like getting old. It's you know, it's one reason, it's a fulfillment of life rather than a personal failure. That I if I take it in a personal way, I can see it as a failure. Isn't it? How, you know, how can you resist? If you see if you could kind of stay young as long as possible. But it's inevitable, isn't it? This is the natural process, the way things are. So the aging process is, you know, with its problems and difficulties, it also has its assets. For one thing, at my age, you don't take things very seriously anymore that you used to. And much more peaceful. You don't have all this energy, youthful energy and raging passions to deal with. It's much calmer, much more calm and easier to just be still and be quiet than, say, when I was even 10 years younger than this. Even sickness and pain, isn't it? How many of you have to endure kind of chronic pain or ailments, diseases, and problems with sight or with vision or with deafness or and see it as a kind of plague or a blight or it's unfair, or one can reflect on it in terms of Dhamma. Like in talking to to people with terminal illnesses or with chronic pain or diseases of any sort, sickness of any sort, it's changing the attitude from I can't bear this is too much, I can't take any more of this, to seeing it in terms of Dhamma. When we begin to see even physical pain or physical limitation or illness or disease in this way, then we can learn from it. We learn Dhamma from it rather than seeing it as something that's ruining our life. Now for death, I can't speak yet about that because I haven't died. So when I die, I'll come back and tell you. And you'll probably be scared if you say ghost. But I'm just being facetious right now. But death is, you know, when you contemplate things in terms of Dhamma, then death is a kind of fulfillment, isn't it? To me, it's like the ultimate final experience. And to be ready for that, to be open to it, to be fully prepared for that most interesting and most profound final experience of the death of the body. This is how I look at it anyway, as something that will be fulfilling, something that is something important that I am preparing myself for, rather than just thinking, well, you've got to die sometime, but don't talk about it. It's a depressing and gruesome subject, and look at it in terms of let's not even mention it or think about it, because it is the unknown, isn't it? Right now, in terms of when we think about our physical death, is we don't know what it is. It's the unknown. It's in the future, isn't it? It will happen tomorrow, maybe, or tonight. We could all die tonight, or in the future. The future is the unknown, and so we we can know this, know that's the way it is in terms of the future. That's what we don't know. In the past, we remember. We have memories of many of the things, or a few of the things that we've experienced in the past. So the past is a memory, isn't it? Right now, in terms of this present Pachubanatam, or here and now reality, is the past is a memory. So whatever, even yesterday is a memory, or this morning is a memory. The future, right now, tomorrow, is, we don't know. It's not a memory. We don't remember tomorrow. But so we anticipate. You think, tomorrow, well, it'll be the same as today, and Monday, and then we'll come here at 5:30 and do this and sit and walk and so forth. But that's what? We're expecting that. So we expect, or we assume, that tomorrow we will be doing this and doing that. We anticipate, or we dread. Maybe tomorrow, something, we're asked to do something that we dread. I don't think I can face that. We'll have that interview with Ajahn Sumedho tomorrow. I don't think I'm ready for that yet. So you anticipate or fear having to confront me tomorrow. And people think I can read minds, but I can't. So you needn't worry. You can be right in front of me and think anything you want, and I wouldn't have a clue usually what. So don't project a lot onto me as kind of Superman. But I mean, this is just pointing to the fact that we can dread, or these kind of emotions we create now. We could dread something. Tomorrow I have to deal with this. I dread that. But that dread is a mental state we're creating now, before those conditions are even present. We're just imagining this as a problem tomorrow, because we don't know. So recognizing in terms of time and as Dhamma, we're seeing that we create these illusions of time ourselves, our past and the future. Even the perception of the present is only a perception. It's not, that's the idea of here and now, Paccuppanna Dhamma, present, is not something to grasp, but a reminder to awaken, isn't it? Not to hold to the view of even the present moment, but of the imminent awakening to this present is what we're pointing to or encouraging. So we can think in terms of the future. If I'm getting old, I don't think I can bear that. But you can. If I get a terminal illness, get terminal cancer or something, a disease of some sort, I couldn't bear it. I'm anticipating the possibility if I lost, my sight, or was deaf, or if I was disabled in some way, or something happened to me, I couldn't bear it. But you can't. But we can anticipate the fact that even before any of this happens, and may never happen, we've already made this statement about, we've created this sense of suffering. I couldn't bear it. I couldn't stand that. I don't want that to happen. So the suffering, even before these things happen to us, you're creating the suffering in the present. Notice how and so this is what we're pointing to, is the suffering we're creating. And the end of suffering is the end of this delusion that we create in the present. So even in the Buddha's life, after his enlightenment, he did get old. He suffered backaches and stomach aches, and he had to deal with difficult bhikkhus and bhikkhunis. We have this whole Vinaya discipline that he was forced to create because of the naughtiness and the bad behavior of monks and nuns. And they did much worse things than any of the monks and nuns that I've lived with. When you read some of the Vinaya, I mean, some of those bhikkhus and bhikkhunis at the time of the Buddha, pretty bad, really. And I'm sure the Buddha had, would feel the irritation, frustration of having such difficult people and having to make up these disciplinary rules and so forth. But this is, in terms of the Buddha himself, he experienced old age, sickness, death, and the frustrations, irritations. His life was threatened. His cousin tried to kill him. He was blackmailed. He was blamed for things he hadn't done. And really, when you read the life of the Buddha after his enlightenment, it wasn't an easy ride of just bliss forevermore. But he had to deal with the problems of a community, of problems, the political problems of the time, the jealousies and that of other groups and of disciples and of other teachers and so forth. All the same kind of things that we have to deal with in this time. So this is the way the world is, rather than thinking once I'm enlightened, then I'll live in a state of bliss forevermore. And this is the great hope of becoming totally insensitive. Enlightenment means I'll just live in this refined state of bliss till the body dies. Or is it that we give up this sense of I can't take any more of this, the blaming, the discontentment, the complaining mind, the fear about the future, about the unknown, the resentments about the past, and the guilt and the remorse and the sense of self, the sakkaya ditthi, the endless ways we create suffering about ourselves out of ignorance. This drops away. But then what we're left with is consciousness and this natural sensitivity of this human form. And in the social context and environmental context that we find ourselves, this is the way things are. This is Dhamma. This is the truth of the way it is. And so in reflecting like this, we're not making impossible demands on life, on God, on the universe, on Buddha, or anything else, but we're awakening to the way things are as we experience life. It's an honest and willingness to open and to learn from life as we live it in these human forms till it's time for their physical death. But in terms of Luang Por Chah used to say, die before you die. And sometimes this was a bit of a shock. I remember people Westerners coming to see him, and sometimes he could be pretty he wasn't particularly making it easy for them. They were there looking at the great master and saying, give us some great wisdom teachings, and expecting to hear some terribly inspiring thing come out of his lips. And he'd say, did you come here to die? They go, oh, no, we didn't. But here, we came here to find the truth. And put it up in high highfalutin language. But his point was this die before you die. So this death of the ego, isn't it? As we begin to see the dukkha, or the suffering we create through not understanding Dhamma, then the ego dies. The sakkaya ditthi fades away. And so therefore the sense of me as a person, me this personality, this dies, and this death is a death before the body dies. So in this way, Luang Por Chah would say, die before you die. And even in Shakespeare, those sonnets, and death once dead, there's no more dying then. I mean, this sense of dying before the physical death is not a depressing kind of self-annihilation. It's not like, out of aversion, we're trying to destroy ourselves and become kind of mindless zombies. But when we let go of this ego, this sakkayaditthi, when we allow it to cease, then what's left is this pure intelligence. There's this knowing, this wisdom, and this ability to understand the Dhamma. So this is the Buddha, this paradigm of consciousness, the Buddha, that which knows the truth, or the Dhamma. So in practice, in these various suggestions I've been making, in terms of this recognizing, really seeing this present moment is where it's at. Enlightenment is now. Buddha is now. Dhamma is now. And so it's not a matter of practicing now for the future, but it's trusting in this more and more to see that to use this present moment to be open and willing to reflect on it in terms of, even if the view, I can't take any more of this, comes up, there's a knowing of this as a mental object, isn't there? And even though it's very convincing, I can't take any more of this, I've had enough, yet this is a condition. It's that knowing is what you trust in, rather than in the condition and what it says. So just encouraging you toward this way of reflecting and seeing in a very direct way, and using wisdom, learning to use wisdom. It's not like you don't have any wisdom. It's not like anyone in this room is lacking, doesn't have any wisdom. It's not that way. It's that we may not use wisdom. Wisdom is natural to us when we open and when we are mindful. Then wisdom is natural to this state, this human state that we're in. So I offer this as a reflection for this evening.
Annamayango Vadagata Sadhukaranda Namaste Sadhu 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 Anmodam.
Also, I forgot about it seems like the various duties that people are asked to sign up for, many of them are not. There's nobody volunteering, or several people have taken on several chores. So I want to encourage this as one of a way of practice to help in this endeavor, running this retreat, by looking at this list and offering your services so that it doesn't become a burden for others. So I want to encourage you to take an interest in this side, the kind of karma yoga, mindfulness. It includes practice, it includes mindfulness, wisdom, and any thought, I can't take any more of this, you can you can say in terms of something not to believe in, because you can take more of this, actually. Was there anything else?